Good evening, everyone. Welcome for this opening of the Human Rights Weekend 2021. My name is Anne-Marijn Epker. I am a program editor at the Balie, and I will be your host tonight. I would like to welcome you both on behalf of Human Rights Watch and the Balie, who are joining forces already for 9 years to make this Human Rights Weekend possible. Of course, we would have loved to be able to welcome you live in the Balie, but this time we were forced to organize the festival online. But I'm really glad that you're all here tonight with us. This evening, we will be having a conversation about the heartbreaking film Reunited, a story about Rana Agha and her family. We will first speak about the film and the issue of family reunification and the situation of unaccompanied migrants in Europe. And I will speak about this with the director of the film, Mira Jargil, with Rana Agha herself, and finally with Bill Frelick, the Refugee and Migrant Rights Director at Human Rights Watch. For the second part of the discussion, Tineke Ceelen, the director of Stichting Vluchtling, will also be joining us. But before we start, I have to share some practical matters with you. First of all, this is a Zoom event, which means that everything is being recorded. And although you cannot see each other and only the cameras of the speakers are visible, it might be nice to know that you're here together with us with 200 people in the same Zoom webinar. So maybe that gives you kind of a cozy feeling this evening. And finally, I would like to ask you, if you have any questions already during our conversation, please ask them in the chat, because we will get back to you at the end of the program. At least we will address some of your questions. So please feel free to ask them already in the chat. Before we begin, a little bit about the film Reunited. It tells the story of Rana Agha and her family, who are torn apart by the war in Syria. They are currently living, or in the film, you see that they are living in 3 different countries. Rana is living in Denmark, the children are in Turkey, and her husband is in Canada. The film gives a wonderful insight into the difficulties Rana encounters while trying to bring her family back together. And I'm really happy to be able to speak with her as well on her story and how it went after the film. Some of you might have seen the film already, but for those who weren't able to watch it yet, I would like to take a short look at the trailer of the film.
مرحبا ماما.
لو بعرف إنه الموضوع هيطول أكيد كنت ما رح أقدر.
ليه ماما؟ ولا خليني أحكي معاني أنا ونضال. ما في عنا غير إحنا الاثنين.
وصلكم مصاري؟ بعت له 2000 دولار.
ما خلوني، ما عطوني فيزا.
أنت يمكن تتحملي كم سنة، بس إحنا ما فينا نتحمل أكتر.
يا نيدو يا جاد وحتجوا لهون. تارينا. عن جد لا ولو رجعوكم
يعني بتذكر ايام حلب شلون كنا مبسوطين انه وين صرنا هلا، فما بعرف بلشت حتى افقد الامل انا، فما بعرف.
warm welcome for Mira Jargil, Bill Frelick, and Rana Agha, who will be joining us for the first part of this conversation. Mira, I would like to thank you for sharing this heartbreaking story with us. And Rana, also, thank you very much for sharing your story with us tonight. I would like to start with you, Mira. How did you came to the idea of this film? How did you find Rana? Unmute?
Unmute. I met Rana through a mutual friend. He's a professor in refugee rights, and he knew about Rana, and he told me about her story and her situation, and he thought that it could be a good idea for us to meet. And then we met, and we had a really, really good chemistry, and yeah, pretty quickly I began to film, and that was how it all started.
And
And
did you
Rana was really
immediately
brave to let me film. Yeah.
did you immediately had an idea of what you would like to reach with this film?
You know, documentaries like this, you never know what will happen in life, and how the situation would, to begin with. I thought that this would be a film about her going to reunite with the children, and how it is to integrate in a Danish society after been apart from each other for 1 year. At that time it was 1 year. So but none of us could have known that it would take, you know, all in all 2.5 years for her to reunite. And so it became clear, you know, during the process, what, you know, then my ambition was actually to show the human face behind the journal number, because sadly this is not a unique situation, and also I wanted to provide the debate with a human perspective. So that was my ambition, and I also saw how brutal it is to divide families, and I think that it's every family's right. Yeah, and it is a human right to be with your children.
Yeah, so the goal was to give a face to the numbers.
Yes, exactly.
And was there one moment during the process that struck you most, or that was of impact to you? One
Yeah, I was surprised and pretty shocked how difficult it was to understand the Danish system, and to understand the whole waiting game. And I think that I had some kind of naive idea that if you have will enough to fight for it, then it will happen. But you know, it was so I was pretty surprised and pretty shocked, you know, to see how this system works also from inside, that it was really like this Kafkaesque system. And even me as a Danish citizen that understood the language and everything, it was pretty difficult to understand why it should take so long.
Were you able to help Rana sometimes as well, or were you only filming?
Yeah, I tried to help everything I could, but it as yeah, so yeah, that was pretty natural to do whatever you can. But again, it was a very difficult system to understand. So, but I think, yeah, we all did what we could. But for me, it was also, you know, this process also became, you know, a study of how you uphold your strength in this inhumane situation. And I must say, I really admire Rana's way of dealing with all this. because yeah, and I think it's a very difficult to imagine how yeah it must be to be in a situation like this if
And
you're not in.
what do you think is so special about the way Rana is dealing with this?
The way Rana dealt with it was that I think that I would have been much more angry or maybe aggressive, but she was really patient. And also I think and she's really clever. I think that she knew that if she gave up, then they would all be completely lost. And her way that she managed to be a mother, you know, and to and to also uphold you know, to give hope to the boys and while being honest, yeah. So I really admire her way of dealing
Thank you
with it.
so much. I would like to go to Rana then. Rana, thank you very much for sharing your story, and it's good to hear the words from Mira. I'm also wondering, how is it for you to watch this trailer again? Because when I was watching it for the first time, I almost had to cry because it's such a heartbreaking story. How is it for you to?
For me, it's an issue of life, and I think this all the things of the case about the immigration is a complex issue, and it needs a lot of talk, a lot of interviews, a lot of program. But I can say that, under my opinion, it's the only things we must focus on, that life carries many surprises and demands and great challenges, and only with love between all the people can we continue our path, or can we go on in this life.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Thank you so
because
much.
yeah, because life is full of surprises. Yes, all the time. Maybe she destroyed a lot of countries. Maybe she came with a war, with illness, with many problems. But it's create in this at the same time. It's create inside us another people. So we cannot say that it's positive or negative things. We must only focus on what we can do to solve the problems, how we can together solve the problem.
Really
Yes.
positive view, I think. And
Yeah.
I was wondering, watching the film, actually, how did you end up in 3 different countries as a family? What can you explain a little bit more about what happened?
The thing that when I decided to be, because of the war and all the horrible there, there's no time to describe the things. It was a difficult situation, and I must go. But the thing is, I have 2 children. They refuse to go with me because it's very dangerous. So I decided to go alone, and it took me a lot of time to decide, many nights, maybe crying, trying to find out if I can do that or not. But at least at the end, my 2 children encouraged me and they told me, go, and we will come after that. We will be together again. So we started film with this. I want to be again with them, but it took me a long time to have them with me. And this time, my children grow up, and I lost this time with my children.
Yeah, you lost 2.5 years without your children.
Yes.
Must be
Yes.
really hard. And can you describe the situation as it is now?
Yes. I am currently studying laboratory diagnosis in Denmark, and after that, a terrible effort I did. And the boys are now doing well. They become young men and pursuing their studies, and they are in school, speak fluent Danish, and have friends and many social events. They are always busy.
It sounds really good. And what
Yeah.
is how is COVID impacting your situation?
Yes, I think COVID or it's some kind of war also. It's but with another test. So and always make us feeling strange and asking ourselves, is it real that I cannot contact another people? Yeah. Until now, I cannot accept the situation. It's very difficult for me because I need warmth. I need people around me. I'm alone all the time and double isolation now. Yes.
Mhm. What I found really interesting about the film, an interesting moment, was that you were asking yourself, what happens if our family is back together again? Will we still fit together? Will we still be the same persons? Will I be the same woman? And will my husband be the same husband? How are you looking at that right now? Do you still fit
Um,
together?
yes, my husband is still stuck in his place, far away from us, and hoping the case will end also, and the corona will be ended also. Um, yes, I'm still dreaming that that something will in the future will change all the things, and all the people will do something against the war, and only our human being will dominate everything, dominate everything here. Yes,
But are you still waiting for a decision about the possibility for him to come to Denmark, or
yes, yes. I'm still waiting.
for how long already?
Uh, 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really long time, right? To
Yes.
wait for these kind of
Changing,
matters.
changing the world, changing the world is a very big issue.
Yeah, indeed.
Yes.
Bill Frelick is also joining us tonight. Welcome, Bill. I would like to ask you, how did you watch this movie? What did you think of it?
I mean, I saw a very familiar, I'm sorry to say, a familiar story to me. I've been interviewing Syrian refugees in Lebanon and Jordan and Turkey and Greece and Bulgaria, other countries since the beginning of the conflict. And before that, I was interviewing Iraqi refugees, and before that, you know, Palestinians and more recently Rohingya refugees and Somali refugees. You know, so the family separation is a very familiar story because it happens again and again. And we have unaccompanied children, you know, currently that are stranded in Mexico. They're trying to unite with their parents here in the United States, where I'm speaking to you tonight. I guess the feeling that I had in watching the film was refugees are survivors. And you know, the one person will get on a raft in order to survive and to give her family a chance, and the children will stay in the place that seems at the moment relatively safe, and you don't know, you haven't figured out you know, all the bureaucracies and everything else, but you're trying to survive. And a family may split for safety reasons, because who's going to get the foothold in one place that can then, you know, pull in the tow rope or the life raft for the other ones. And so you in a sense you're trying to ensure that somebody gets through, somebody gets to safety, and somehow can bring the other ones to safety. And that happens, and that's something that that once separated, it's very, very hard to reunite.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And of course, it takes an enormous toll, as we saw in the film.
Sorry, what was the last thing you said?
It takes an enormous toll, psychological toll, and that the waiting game is not something that is neutral. It's something that is harmful, and you see, you know, the experience of all the members of the family, the children in particular.
And what did you think looking at the two boys living on their own in Turkey?
Well, one of the thoughts that I had there, and I'm very so pleased to hear Rana talking about that they are engaged in having education now in Denmark, because at the time of this film, the estimates were about 40% of the Turkish children, I mean, of the Syrian refugee children in Turkey were not going to school. They were selling trinkets on the street. They were doing odd jobs of one sort or another to try to survive. And they were not in school at all. And so we really were looking at a lost generation of children that actually prior to the conflict, Syria had a pretty good education system, and people that were well educated and have really fallen into many children that have lost their education and have given up hope of an education. And that's obviously where the future really lies for children. But situation has been very difficult for all refugees in Turkey. It's now the largest refugee hosting country in the world, and it's very difficult to manage in Turkey or to get out of Turkey.
And Bill, do you have any numbers of how many families like Rana's families there are in Europe at the moment who are living separated?
I think there was something like 36,000 unaccompanied children that went into Greece from 2016. Last year, there was an attempt to do a relocation program where there was a commitment to resettle, I think it was around 1,400, if I remember correctly, refugees out of Greece into 11 other European member states. But at that time in Greece alone, there were still something like 4,500 unaccompanied children in Greece. So even though it was great that there were some offers to try to relocate and resettle unaccompanied children, the need was far greater than even the commitments that were made. And then COVID came in, and of course, a lot of that went awry in any case. But it's hard to put numbers on much of what's happening because a lot of people are not documented properly, and you have undocumented populations, and you have people that are not they're not registered, and in many places, Turkey included, it's actually quite difficult to get registered, and so there's a population that we just don't see. And
why is it so difficult if you want to be registered? Why is it so difficult if you want to be registered to really do it or to become registered?
I mean, registration brings with it a sense of responsibility on the governments that register you. And so we see in Lebanon, for example, probably 85% of the Syrian refugees do not have a legal residency in Lebanon at this point. I mean, that's a huge number of people. Everyone knows that the refugees are there, but no one wants to take responsibility for them. And while there's a temporary protection regime in place in Turkey officially, supposedly with work authorization has to come through employers. They don't want to do that. There's a gray economy. And new arrivals are not able to register in any case. So it's only sort of an existing caseload that gets registered, and then bureaucracy upon bureaucracy is overlaid to create obstacles for people to renew their registrations. And so they fall out of status if they had a status to begin with.
And Bill, what is your reflection on the length of the procedure, for example, in Denmark, but I can imagine it's the same in other Western European countries as well. Is this case an exception, or is it quite common?
No, in fact, it's written into the European Commission directive on family reunification. Provides authorization for member states to have a 2-year waiting period and here's again, it gets a little technical, they're very bureaucratic, but we have in Europe, there's refugee status, which is based on the Refugee Convention. People are familiar with the well-founded fear of being persecuted. But most of the refugees that came in the huge exodus in 2015, most of the Syrian refugees were provided something called subsidiary protection, which was kind of an expedient with the numbers of people provide a temporary protection basically based on armed conflict, and so it's not based on a persecution standard. It's sort of a quick and dirty way of providing protection to people, which is good when there's a mass influx. However, they created sort of dual benefits. And so refugees were given an easier way of getting family reunification and a more direct way of doing it. And there were different benefits that applied and longer, and the term of the protection was actually 3 years for refugees, 1 year for people with subsidiary protection. And the presumption behind this is that, if it's armed conflict that you're fleeing, that's going to be over quickly and you'll be able to go home. If it's persecution that you're fleeing, you'll be here for a long time. Well, in fact, there's no inherent reason why armed conflict won't go on and on and on, or why a person that is recognized as a refugee because of persecution. I mean, there could be a coup, a change in government, and you could go from being a refugee one day to not needing protection the next. So there's no inherent difference to provide one set of benefits to one and a different set of benefits for the other. And there's been some recognition of that in the European structures, basically. And there was a recasting of the what's called the qualification directive to try to do that. But the reunification directive has maintained this distinction. The time periods remain the same. And what we see is different member states. For example, Denmark opted out of the reunification directive altogether. They just said, we don't want any part of it. So a supposed common European asylum system, a member state can say, well, we're going to do our own thing, which Denmark has said. Denmark has also said that they're now reassessing all those subsidiary protection claims to see whether they still need to be protected anymore. And people in Damascus in particular, they're reassessing those claims as we speak. But these are the kinds of things where you see these kinds of anomalies. The chance that one person's in Denmark, another person's in the Netherlands, the chance that one person with the exact same story, the exact same set of circumstances, one person's recognized as a refugee, the other one has subsidiary protection, the other one has an asylum case that's still pending.
But that might also be the reason why some people decide that one person goes to one country, the father goes to another country, and the kids stay here, because you really have to spread your chances. I think that's a
as I said, it's a survival mechanism.
Yeah. And Mira, what would your advice be to the Danish government in order to improve the situation for families like Rana?
Can I have the question again? What is my advice for my advice for Danish citizens is to put to think about families like this next time we vote for a new government, because as I said, I think it's really brutal to separate families like this, and I don't understand why it has to take this long. And for me this is a political film.
A political film.
Yeah.
And do you know of any politicians who have watched it and changed their policies yet?
I don't know if they have changed their policies, but and we don't know if it will have an impact yet. But maybe next time when we vote for a new government, right now it doesn't look so good. I think it's it's been harder. When Rana, she's a doctor, so she could apply for a family reunification from day one. But if you're not in a threatened position, then when at the time that Rana came to Denmark as a Syrian refugee, you could apply after 1 year. But now the rules has changed, and now you can apply after 3 years. So it has changed, today it's much more difficult to get a family reunification. And you can imagine if you can apply after 3 years, and then it takes 2.5 years more yeah, pretty
so
tough.
it only became worse. Rana, I would like to end with you for this part of the conversation, at least. I was wondering, Bill also already told about it, but your kids were so enthusiastic about learning the language, etc. How is it going with them now? Are they still doing well? How?
Yeah, they continue to study at the Danish school, and they are doing well, very well. And they are talking now Danish perfect in me. And yeah, but we are all of us still have this kind of feeling that war is an ugly thing. And we always think that there is a day all the people will stand just one day thinking what they need in this life, what the demands they want, and trying to find the happiness and love in a way without making trouble to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And we think like this, we dream like this, and I'm not dreaming to change all the world, but we continue dreaming that the human being must believe in love. Only love can save us. My love to my children and when my children love me, it makes us so strong to continue. And when I love Mira and Mira love me, we make this film also.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I have two questions coming in already. So if you don't mind, I will ask them now, and then we go to the second part of the conversation. There's one question for Rana, which is, can you speak about the main sources of hope, resilience, and support that you and your children found through this ordeal? What would you advise other families in this situation?
The same advice that we must always gather together to help each others, and we must continue believing that in this life there is a people think of other people, and there is a people who think differently, and we always try to find the power in ourselves also, because we cannot imagine that we have this kind of power in ourselves until we become in a place where everything is locked, and it's a death of life situation, and you will suddenly find yourself become a hero. Yeah, yeah.
You become a superwoman.
So believe in yourself. We must believe in ourselves. We must believe in our children, that they will do a lot of things we cannot imagine, that they have the power to do it.
Yeah, yes. And I think something you just said was also really beautiful. Like, keep on dreaming about the future. That might also be good for a lot of people who are facing difficulties now in many situations and places.
There is always tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. And then a question to Bill. How does the right to a family life play into these long asylum procedures?
It's very interesting that the way that the bureaucracy sort of beats you no matter which direction you go. So you have a long asylum procedure, and while you're in that procedure, you don't have status yet, you can't apply for family reunification. So you're stuck in this long procedure, and you can't reunite with your family. If you get the subsidiary protection, if you have the short procedure, then you have a long waiting period that's built in that's built into that. So either way, you're defeated in a sense, and either way, you're going to be waiting, because to get the refugee status, you have the long wait for the procedure. To get subsidiary protection, you have the long wait to qualify for reunification. So, but I go back to Mira's point. we're talking about a basic human right here. You know, family as the recognized unit of society is in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's in the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights. It's on the Convention on the Rights to the Child.
Yeah.
This is, you know, pretty fundamental, and yet we see family actually separated, as we saw here in the United States, where the state actually, you know, separated asylum seekers from their children, or they're separated because of the forces of war that as we saw Rana's home completely demolished, destroyed, and scatters families, and then the notion that they have to pay the price, they have to sort of wait and earn the right to get family reunification.
Yeah.
And this 2-year period has been extended. Austria has opted to extend it to to 3 years. And Germany in 2018 abolished family reunification for subsidiary protection altogether. And Hungary has added so many requirements for material support that the family can show that they've got, you know, income and housing and insurance and all these other things that nobody can possibly qualify to bring their children together. So it makes it look as though this is some sort of a benefit, some sort of a reward, when in fact it's a human right.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the 3 of you, actually, because we're going to the next part of the conversation. Thank you, Mira and Rana and Bill. Bill, you will be staying with us for some time, but Mira and Rana will be back soon for the last question. So see you in a bit, and thank you so much. Yeah, for this second part of the conversation, we will look at the broader issue of refugees in Europe, and we will be joined by Tineke Ceelen as well. I introduced her already, but she's the director of Stichting Vluchtling in the Netherlands, and I'm really happy you're here with us, Tineke. Yeah, I wanted to speak a bit about the situation of refugees in Europe now, and also the impact of the COVID crisis. But before we're going to start with that, I wanted to show you a short clip on the work that Human Rights Watch did in the past year to improve the situation of people all over the world in relation to this COVID crisis. Please take a look at the video.
More than 1 billion young people have been affected by the school closures worldwide. There can be a disproportionate effect on at-risk children, like those with disabilities, refugees, and those from very low-income families. Governments need to ensure these young people are especially supported right now.
Millions of refugees live in close proximity in unsanitary, overcrowded refugee camps and detention centers. Rational, evidence-based measures to protect public health are not in conflict with the right to seek asylum, but rejecting asylum seekers at borders and sending them back to places where their lives are threatened is.
Lockdowns may be necessary to slow the spread of COVID-19, but limits on freedom of movement should never be imposed in an arbitrary or discriminatory way. Authorities should impose restrictions for the least amount of time necessary and provide support for people who are left alone or trapped in abusive situations.
Yeah, so welcome Tineke and welcome Bill. Tineke, I would like to start with you. I was wondering, did you watch the movie already, and what did you think of it?
I found it heartbreaking. Like Bill, I recognize the story. I visited many places where there are refugees in the world, and one of the most difficult things to face is if people lose each other or choose to lose each other, like Rana did, that they split the family in order to find safety. That's heartbreaking. And like Bill, I see it everywhere. And we should feel responsible for it. And what I find particularly disturbing is that we in Europe are not able or willing, and I think it's the last, to solve this quickly and smoothly. That we make people suffer so badly, I find very disturbing.
Yeah, you were just mentioning, is it unwillingness, or are we just unable to solve the crisis? And you think we are unwilling to do it?
Well, depends which crisis, but this crisis, that families are split, that look at the picture, look at what was already said by the filmmaker, that it's you're looking at it, you can't even believe it is happening. It's like this is done on purpose. It's people are being sent from left to right, from up to down and back again, and don't know where to go, don't know what next step to take. And it looks like nobody feels responsible. And if I look at refugee crisis all over the world, this problem seems to come back all the time. It's not my problem, it's your problem. No, it's not my problem, it's your problem. It's not a problem from Greece, it's the problem from Europe. No, it's not a problem from Europe. We're sending each other around, nobody takes responsibility.
Yeah, it's the same as we're seeing in Greece right now, of course. All the European countries are acting like it's Greece's problem, and that the problem has been needs to be solved over there. And we're actually kind of outsourcing our problems, right?
Well, it's pretty shameful. Huh? If you look at, Lesbos gets a lot of attention, since there are the most NGOs on Lesbos. But if you look at the Greek islands, it might even be worse, on Samos, Chios, where we are also working. Lesbos now has 9,000 refugees on the island, of which 7,000 are in what we call Moria 2. Moria 1 was burned down, then the army quickly built this Moria 2 on polluted grounds, where Human Rights Watch knows everything about that. They promised they would make the circumstances much better than in Moria 1, but the contrary is true. People cannot go out of the camp. They need permission to go out of the camp, which is complicated. And they are living in what by all standards, we could say very bad conditions. They're living in tents. They are being provided with heaters, but there is not sufficient electricity, so you can't run the heaters. So people are making fires to keep themselves and their children warm, which gives, of course, a lot of risk. There's insufficient bad food. There is insufficient toilets. There are 400 toilets, of which only 212 as of today are functional. From the showers, 218 showers, not even 10% is functional, and that with no hot water, etc., with 7,000 people. If you look at that, and that now we have the winter conditions, there's a bad weekend in front of the door. People are cold, there's no end in sight. Like with Rana's story, the people don't know, when is this going to end? When do we know that we can work on our future again, that we can become a human being again? So on top of this humanitarian crisis, you get a bad mental health crisis. So children cutting themselves, a high rate of suicide amongst the people in those camps. It's a very shameful situation for which I feel that all of the European countries are also responsible.
And what could they do, or what should they do, Tineke, according to you?
I think the European Union should take responsibility. First of all, no pushbacks. People are being put back on the boats and pushed back towards Turkey.
Is that being done by EU officials, or what can they do about it if it's just people who are living on the Greek islands doing this kind of?
I don't think this is just a fisher boat picking up refugees in the camp and sending them back to Turkey. I'm afraid these are officials doing it. So, and I think that the European Union should make a lot of noise around this. This cannot happen on our soil. And the same is applicable for these living circumstances. You cannot let people live purposely. It's a choice. If we want to solve this situation, we can solve the situation. We choose not to do so. That's extremely shameful. There are disabled people, there are children, there are sick people. It's unbelievable that year in, year out, we're not willing to solve it. As for the Netherlands, we should participate in, the Greek government asked in October 2019 that European countries would help solve the problems of the unaccompanied minors, that they would take over a certain number of unaccompanied minors. First of all, the Netherlands for a long time said, no, we only want a structural solution for the problem. And then the Netherlands said, okay, we will take 100 people from the islands, but then added so many buts and ifs that as of today, we only have one unaccompanied minor.
Really? I thought I read it in December, it were 40 or 50 or something, but
that's a different group of people. It's so when they didn't find these unaccompanied minors, they added other people, which families, which okay is also fine, but not the unaccompanied minors because of the conditions which were added. It could only be unaccompanied minors with a big chance they would be granted asylum and under the age of 14. Obviously, for other children, they are not children if they're over 14.
And Bill, I saw you nodding when we spoke about these pushbacks, right? What do you as Human Rights Watch do about this or can do about this?
Well, first, I personally have been documenting pushbacks from Greece by Greek police since 2008. This has been continuing. We've documented it again and again and again and again. So, while there are vigilante groups that are out there that I think work in concert with the police, the border police and the Coast Guards are very much involved in these pushbacks. And particularly last year, when Turkey announced in late February that they were going to open essentially the EU-Turkey deal of March 2016 was done completely and over. They would open their borders up and allow people to leave and go to Greece, Bulgaria, wherever. And the response of Greece, that this is pre-COVID-19, by the way, was to suspend the asylum system, to basically say that they would summarily return people back to Turkey. And I was there actually, I was on Lesbos at that time. We had a team of people that were both in Turkey and in Greece along the land border as well. And we were documenting the pushbacks that were occurring. I was documenting on Lesbos the boats that were being pushed there as well, and people that were being put onto Greek naval vessels, and that I was actually trying to reach them and talk to them, and was being prevented from doing that. So this is very well documented. Others have documented as well. Frontex is now, its management board, and there are various investigations going on. The border, external border management agency. But a lot of this is something that Greece is directly responsible for. We also last year, and again, I personally was doing the research on it, was documenting pushbacks from Cyprus as well, both pushbacks of people that are trying to leave Lebanon. And we've documented Turkey's pushbacks at the border with Syria as well. So it's not just Greece, and I agree very much with Tineke that it's a failure on the part of the European Union. It goes back to the Dublin regulation, which puts the onus on the countries that are on the external frontiers of the European Union and sort of insulates those that are in the interior. And there was supposedly there was actually a declared new pact on asylum and migration that the European Commission put through in late last year. And essentially that conceded that all the schemes to relocate asylum seekers and to share the burden more equitably within the European Union had failed. And they were basically saying that member states could opt to, cooperate by funding repatriation, deportation flights and this kind of thing. So as opposed to sharing responsibility and actually taking people like these unaccompanied children into their own countries. So it leaves Greece, with this population. And the response in Greece, there's been, xenophobic violence, there's been pushbacks, there have been the conditions that Tineke described in which people have been living in these camps. I can tell you I've seen them myself, I've been to those camps. The conditions are just shockingly abysmal. And the fact that this new camp, supposedly this better camp, was constructed on a military proving ground.
Yeah, you did also
from 1926 until just before this camp was opened, until a month before this camp was opened. This was where the military was shooting off, artillery and this kind of thing. It is a toxic environment. It's, the testing has shown high rates of lead, which is a heavy metal that's particularly toxic and damaging to development of brains for children. And the areas that are toxic are in the administrative areas or adjacent to residential areas where children are having to sit and wait in line while their parents are trying to get services, and areas where they're playing in the dust, which again is the way that this toxic metal is transmitted to humans.
And what can your organizations do in order to improve the situation in the camps, Tineke?
Well, we are, this is a devil, how to call it in English, a devilish dilemma. We choose not to work inside the camps, places where people are being locked inside the camps. That's, besides that, the Greek have gotten plenty of money from the European Union to make those camps into a decent place. So it's their responsibility to make those conditions better. However, we do, of course, work on the Greek islands, and we have large psychosocial programs to help the people with psychological problems. But then we take them from the camps, we take them to Mytilene, the city on Lesbos, and bring them to a psychologist or psychiatrist, whatever they need. They get medicines, and they also, it's being looked at what problems do the people have, and if they need help with hygiene articles or whatever, then we help them as well.
And Tineke, I heard you also during the first part of the discussion about the responsibility of the Greek government. And how do you see that in relation to the responsibility of the European Union? Do you think that we should start looking at the government in Greece, or should we keep on focusing on the EU? What is most important?
Let's, after all these years, not bother with finding who should do something first. I think we all should act now. This has taken way too long. The European Union made sufficient money available to the Greek authorities to make those conditions much better. And in return, also the European Union cannot just wire money and then say, good luck with it. We should share in the burden. We cannot let, according to the Dublin Agreement, Greece, Italy, Spain to a lesser level. We cannot let them deal with all of these people knocking the doors of the European Union. And we should share the burden by taking over people and bring them to other European countries. And the Netherlands should participate as well as other countries in Europe.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you very much. My final question is about COVID and the way in which COVID actually impacts the situation in those camps. How do you think about that, Bill? Is it worsening the situation, or is the situation already so terrible that it doesn't really have an impact?
Thankfully, COVID didn't have the impact that we were afraid it might have on Lesbos, and it was in many ways because the refugees were as frightened of the locals as the locals were of the refugees. Everyone was very much keeping apart. People were self-segregating, even though, the conditions in Moria camp, and I was there in March right at about the time when COVID was first being declared as a global pandemic, and very overcrowded camp with completely unhygienic conditions. And I was quite fearful that there would be a raging epidemic there.
Huh.
But people were very careful about movement in and out of the camp to try to ensure that it wouldn't come. There were quite a good share of other communicable diseases that were still a problem there. And COVID, of course, was a greater or lesser problem in many other places, but in many respects, in terms of migration globally, it was a slowing down of, there's less movement of people, more restrictions on movement. It was oftentimes used as a pretext to block people from seeking asylum. And in some places, in Spain, for example, Portugal, it resulted in the decongestion of some of the migrant detention centers oftentimes under court orders, in order not to allow the spread of infection in places where people were forced into close proximity. But you had the people forced into close proximity in Moria, in these detention centers in Greece, and we're just, I think, very, very lucky. And it's just a pure, I don't know if you call it serendipity, a pure happenstance that this suspension, the shutdown, all the shutdowns that occurred in late February, early March, while I was there, that were done in response to Turkey declaring that the border was open. It had nothing to do with public health whatsoever. In retrospect, Greece claimed that these were public health measures, and they extended them. What they also did was, when there were other general population lockdowns, and then when they would relieve those lockdowns, they didn't do that for the refugee populations. And so there's a discriminatory element to this as it developed over time as well.
Mm-hmm. So because they could use the lockdowns in the refugee camps.
Yeah. And again, I think there was there was a prejudice, there was a discrimination. So it wasn't based purely on scientific bases. It was done in a sort of a ham-fisted discriminatory manner. And we saw that in many other places. Lebanon's a good example where, strictures that were specifically on the refugee population, which is completely intermixed with the general population, but you'd have a curfew only on the refugees and not on other people, purportedly because of COVID-19. And there was just no basis for that at all. You had, when there was a higher incidence of COVID-19 in the United States than there was in Mexico, you had an order from the Centers for Disease Control preventing asylum seekers, unaccompanied children, anyone from migrating, across the southern border from Mexico to the United States, where there was very little COVID-19 in Mexico. There's actually much more in the United States.
Yeah.
It didn't matter. It was, again, it wasn't based on any sort of a rational, evidence-based scientific assessment. It was very political and I would argue a pretext for pre-existing policies that, in the case of the United States, the Trump administration had long been seeking to do in any case, and saw this as an opportunity to shut down asylum, shut down immigration entirely.
Yeah, Tineke, before we go to the final round of questions from the audience, I would like to ask you, where do you get hope from these days?
From people like Rana. I meet so many refugees in situations I think, how in heaven's name, how? But refugees are remarkably strong people. And if people like Rana don't give up, who am I to give up?
That's a really beautiful message. Thank you so much. I would like to welcome Rana and Mira again for the final round of discussions and questions. And I'm going to see if there's any questions for you. Yes, the first one is for Rana. In the film, at one point, You said, I should not have left Turkey and leave my sons behind. The son said the same. Looking back, would you do the same again? That's the question.
We are always facing troubles and confused situation where you are not sure if you take the right decision or not. And the war is something make you feel that you are not the same person. So sometimes I feel if I go back, I ask myself the same question and say, I will do that. I will do that again and again because I believe that decision to sacrifice and for the safety of your children and for give them the chance to be happy and in a safe place and continue studying and all that normal things. So is something you repeated again and again, repeat it again and again, and every time, because in every situation, because whatever the price is, I know that separation from the family and war is something causes sadness all the time, and some kinds of sadness you cannot get rid of. And until now, I even if I go in my life and do a lot of things and started from zero again and do all that way in again, because when I finished everything and I have my clinic now, I started to study from zero. But even that, and even I'm trying to build a new life, but I still feeling sadness, and I still missing my mother, my husband, my brother, my sister, my friends, and that mean we continue in our internal war.
And your mother and the rest of your family, are they still in Syria
Yes.
or in other parts of Europe?
In Syria.
And where are they?
In Aleppo.
Yes. Yeah, hopefully you will see each other someday again.
I hope.
Yeah. Tineke, the final question is for you, and it's about the upcoming elections here in the Netherlands. We will be having elections on March 17th. And the question is, will Stichting Vluchtling provide a dossier with what needs to be done so political parties can use that during the coalition negotiations?
Normally we don't. It's normally we. There are other NGOs who do provide such kinds of files, but normally we don't. We are too small for those kinds of things. But I see who's asking this question, Boris Dietrich. And it might be a good idea if in this exceptional case, since we are in a very bad period of time regarding refugees and the climate for refugees, so we might reconsider.
Do you have the capacity for doing that, for example, for this year?
If you want the capacity, we have the capacity.
You will make the capacity in order to
we'll
do
create it.
Right. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up this really interesting, inspiring, and touching conversation. I would like to thank you very much for joining us. First of all, Rana, for sharing your story and your thoughts and your positive ideas with us tonight. I think that's really really admirable and brave. Mira, thank you so much for making this wonderful documentary which will be shown hopefully in many countries around the world and on many festivals to come. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Bill, Frelick, and Tineke, Ceelen, thank you very much for joining us tonight. And I would also like to thank you, the audience, for joining us. I hope you liked the conversation. And I wanted to tell you as well that there's many more films to watch on the Human Rights Watch channel this weekend. And you will find a QR code on the slide, which will be visible in a second. And if you scan the code, you see the page where you can watch the films this weekend. So please, I would highly recommend you to do so. And for now, I wanted to thank you very much for joining us and enjoy your evening.